Barron Trump was not just another young man walking through the streets of New York City. He was the only son of President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, and though the world often saw him as just a figure behind the political scenes, Barron was carving out his own quiet path. At 18 years old, Barron had been raised under intense scrutiny, with his every move analyzed by the public eye. Yet, despite the fame that came with his last name, Barron had always kept a low profile. His demeanor was calm, and he preferred to stay out of the spotlight, focusing on his personal life and development away from the pressure of politics. Barron had been homeschooled, but recently he had started to venture out on his own more, wanting to experience the city anonymously, to understand the world as it was, not just through the lens of politics or wealth. On this particular day, he wandered the streets of Manhattan, soaking in the sights and sounds of the bustling city. He wasn't surrounded by the usual entourage of Secret Service agents. Instead, he was simply a young man walking through the crowd, trying to blend in and find some normalcy. Though he had been sheltered from the struggles of many, Barron was not unaware of the hardships others faced. As he made his way toward Central Park, the buzz of the city surrounding him, Barron noticed something. Someone sitting just off the sidewalk. A homeless man, with a tattered coat, a dirty baseball cap, and a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps. God bless." His appearance was a stark contrast to the pristine image Barron was often associated with. Barron paused. It wasn't unusual to see people in this city asking for change. It was, after all, one of the most bustling, diverse cities in the world, where the extremes of wealth and poverty coexisted side by side. But as Barron looked at this man, something in the sadness of his eyes struck a chord within him. The man's face was weathered, his expression one of resignation, but there was also something else, hope. The hope that a passerby might stop, might offer him something, anything, to help him survive the cold and the harsh reality of living on the streets. The man's voice called out to Barron, interrupting his thoughts. "Hey, kid, got any change?" The words were simple, the request no different than the countless others Barron had heard in the city, but they seemed to cut through the noise of the city. The homeless man's voice was rough, a result of years of living on the streets, but there was no bitterness in it, only the quiet request for help. Barron stood still, his gaze locked onto the man. For a brief moment, the noise of the world around him seemed to fade away. He had never been in a position to understand the struggles of people like this man, but he had heard the stories of the forgotten, the dispossessed, the marginalized. He had seen the media coverage of homelessness in the city, but had always been shielded from it, living in the protective bubble of the White House and the affluence that came with it. But now, in this moment, there was something about this man's presence that made Barron feel different. The compassion in the man's voice seemed to call to him, to pull him into a world that was far from the luxury he was accustomed to. Barron reached into his pocket, expecting to pull out a few coins, but as his fingers brushed the coins in his pocket, he felt something more, a need to do more than just hand out change. Without a word, Barron took out a $20 bill from his wallet and, for the first time, made eye contact with the man. As he bent down slightly to hand him the money, his voice was calm, yet filled with an unexpected depth of sincerity. "I don't have much to give, but I'm happy to share what I can. You matter. More than you know." The homeless man blinked, his eyes widening in disbelief as he stared at the $20 bill. He hadn't expected someone like Barron Trump, a young, privileged man, to stop and offer him more than just a few quarters or small change. His voice was almost a whisper, filled with emotion. Thank you, kid. You have no idea what this means." Barron straightened up, his gaze never leaving the man. There was something in the moment that felt right, a reminder that kindness could still shine through the chaos of the world around them. Barron gave the man a small, sincere smile, his voice soft. "You're welcome. I hope things get better for you." As Barron turned to walk away, the man's voice rang out once more, but this time it was full of gratitude and hope. "You're a good kid, you know that? Don't ever lose that. You've got a good heart." Barron paused for a moment, feeling the weight of the man's words. They were simple, yet they carried an impact that stayed with him. In that brief exchange, Barron had seen the person, not the homeless man, not the figure on the sidewalk, but the human being with his own story, his own struggles, his own dreams. As he continued his walk through the city, Barron felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. This encounter, this simple act of human connection, had left an impression on him that would stay with him long after the day ended. It wasn't about the money, it was about the dignity he had been able to restore, if only for a brief moment. After that encounter, Barron Trump continued his walk through the city, but the weight of the moment lingered in his thoughts. He had done something that most people would consider a small act of kindness, yet for him, it had felt like so much more. He had been raised in a world of privilege and power, but that moment with the homeless man had shaken him to his core. It had reminded him of the realities that so many people faced, a reality that he was often shielded from. Barron had always been aware of the disparities in society, the differences in wealth, status, and opportunity, but today he had been confronted with something more personal. As the son of a president, he had grown up surrounded by luxury, security, and the constant scrutiny of the media. Yet, the simplicity of the homeless man's request had forced Barron to see the world through a different lens. It was as if the veil had been lifted, and for the first time, he truly understood the gap between those who had everything and those who had nothing. Barron spent the next few hours wandering around the city, still processing the encounter. He walked through Central Park, past the towering buildings, and down the busy avenues, but his mind kept returning to that moment with the homeless man. The man's words echoed in his ears, especially the last one, "You've got a good heart." Barron couldn't shake the feeling that he had somehow made a real difference, even if it was just for a few minutes in the life of a stranger. But little did Barron know, this encounter was far from over. Word of the exchange had already started to spread. The media, always quick to seize on any moment involving the Trump family, had picked up on the story. News outlets were reporting that Barron Trump, the son of the president, had stopped to offer help to a homeless man on the streets of New York. The story quickly went viral, with headlines reading, "Barron Trump's unexpected act of kindness," and "President's son shows heart, homeless man grateful for Barron's generosity." At first, Barron didn't pay much attention. He was still trying to make sense of his feelings, unsure of how to process the outpouring of emotions that the experience had triggered. But soon, the comments started rolling in, tweets, social media posts, and news segments, all praising Barron for his gesture. People were talking about the impact of his actions, the genuine kindness he had shown, and the hope he had inspired in others. Among the voices praising Barron was the homeless man himself. He had been interviewed by several media outlets, recounting the moment he had shared with the president's son. His words were filled with gratitude and hope. "I never expected someone like him to stop and help me. He didn't just give me money. He gave me something I haven't had in a long time, dignity. He treated me like I mattered. And for that, I'm forever grateful." The reaction from the public was overwhelmingly positive. For once, the media wasn't focusing on the political agenda, the scandals, or the controversies that had often surrounded the Trump family. Instead, they were focusing on something simple yet powerful, humanity. It was a refreshing shift for Barron, who had spent much of his life living in the public's gaze, scrutinized for every move he made. But not everyone saw the situation in the same light. The media, of course, couldn't resist adding their own spin. Some outlets praised Barron for his generosity, but others, especially those who had been critical of the Trump family, tried to twist the narrative. They questioned Barron's sincerity, calling it a PR stunt or trying to diminish the impact of his actions. The constant scrutiny of the Trump family had created a sense of cynicism around everything they did, and even the smallest act of kindness was met with doubt. Barron, however, refused to let the negative comments affect him. He had done what he believed was right, and the gratitude he had received from the homeless man was more than enough to reassure him that he had made the right choice. He knew that some people would never see things the way he did, but that didn't change the fact that he had taken action and made a difference. As the days went by, Barron's life gradually returned to normal. The media buzz around his act of kindness eventually died down, replaced by new stories, new headlines. But for Barron, the experience had changed him. He had witnessed firsthand the power of compassion, the difference that even the smallest act of human kindness could make in someone's life. And in a world that often seemed divided, it had reminded him of the importance of seeing people not for their status, but for their humanity. Barron wasn't sure where this new understanding would lead him. Would it shape his future choices? Would it change the way he approached the world? He didn't know. But he did know one thing. This moment had made him realize that change, no matter how small, could start with a single gesture. And he was ready to be a part of it. Days passed, and the initial media storm surrounding Barron Trump's encounter with the homeless man began to settle. The story, which had captured the hearts of many, faded from the front pages of newspapers and the trending topics on social media. But for Barron, the impact of that brief moment remained, and as time went on, he started to see how his simple act of kindness had sparked something larger, a ripple effect that went far beyond the initial exchange. The homeless man, whose life had been upturned by circumstances beyond his control, had started receiving support from unexpected places. Donations flooded in from individuals and charitable organizations, all inspired by the story of Barron's kindness. The man, who had once been invisible to so many, was now receiving help, shelter, food, and even opportunities to rebuild his life. Barron's actions had created an outpouring of goodwill, and the ripple effect was undeniable. People from all walks of life, from celebrities to ordinary citizens, took to social media to share their own stories of helping others. Some spoke about their experiences with homelessness, others about small acts of kindness they had performed. But one thing was clear. Barron had inspired people to look beyond the surface and see each other as human beings, deserving of respect and compassion. Barron, for his part, was quiet about the growing impact. He had never sought the attention or praise that followed his actions. He had simply done what he thought was right in the moment. But as the weeks passed, he couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude that something as simple as a conversation with a stranger had had such a profound effect. The media, ever hungry for the next story, had moved on to the usual political headlines. Barron's name no longer dominated the news cycle. But behind the scenes, the change his act had ignited continued to grow. Barron had unknowingly become a symbol of empathy in a world that often seemed divided and harsh. Despite the positive shifts his actions had brought, Barron also had to face the darker side of fame. Some critics, unable to ignore the Trump name, still tried to discredit the sincerity of his gesture. They branded it as a publicity stunt, questioning whether it had been an act of true kindness or merely an attempt to make the Trump family appear more relatable. For Barron, these criticisms were difficult to hear. He had not acted with any ulterior motive. He had not cared for the headlines, the praise, or the attention. It had simply been about a moment in which he saw another human being in need and reached out to help. Yet, even in the face of criticism, Barron remained steadfast in his belief that his act was something that could inspire others, regardless of the narrative that surrounded it. One afternoon, as Barron sat quietly in his room, reflecting on the past few weeks, he received a message that would stick with him forever. It was from the homeless man he had helped, a simple, heartfelt message of thanks. "You don't know what this has meant to me. I've been on the streets for years, and I've seen my share of people walk by without a second thought. But you saw me, and you treated me like I mattered. I'll never forget that." The message was short, but its impact was immense. Barron knew, in that moment, that it wasn't about the money. It was about being seen, being treated with dignity. It was about the connection they had shared, a fleeting encounter that had changed both of their lives. As the days turned into weeks, Barron couldn't help but reflect on how far-reaching that simple exchange had been. Not just for the homeless man, not just for him, but for the many others who had been touched by the story, the countless individuals who had felt inspired to act with more compassion and understanding. Barron wasn't just the son of the president anymore. He was a young man who had taken a moment of his life to truly make a difference. And that difference was still growing, a snowball effect of kindness that was being carried on by people everywhere. The world was not perfect. There were still struggles, divisions, and challenges. But Barron had learned something invaluable. Even the smallest act of kindness, when it's done with genuine care, can change the course of someone's life. And that change, no matter how small, could create a ripple that reached far beyond the initial act. As Barron looked out of his window, watching the sun set over the city, he felt a sense of peace settle within him. The world was full of stories of hardship, stories of hope. And in his story, one simple encounter with a homeless man had become a beacon of change, reminding him and others that kindness still had the power to heal.